that as men, we abhor violence against women. We abhor against violence against children, but we also abhor violence against men. Sometimes we fail to acknowledge that. So let's see if we could go into this
You
program
have
now.
it.
Yes, thank you very much. Wonderful. Okay, so I hope you all are viewing us. Domestic violence, violence against men. So the first thing that I want to point out is that this question, do men really suffer domestic violence? And I think Murchison did a great job in expressing that they do. A lot of times we don't hear about it because of the embarrassment and so on. So I will try not to repeat some of the things. But let me tell you that there are attacks on men because of their status, willful attack by women on men of status. I'll give you one example. There's a senior uniformed officer that I spoke with, and he's saying that his wife willfully slaps him, cuffs him, and kicks him, and says, "Hit me back now. See if I wouldn't let you lose your work." So he feels trapped because he has a senior position, he's a leader, he has status in society, and she is using that as her means of creating a domestic violence. And as Murchison said, can he report that? How would it be your senior officer going on report being abused, and in your normal job you are a person who have a certain measure of authority and ability to manage your circumstance, and you go home and you can't do that? So of course he has not been saying anything, and of course he also looks at his pension, does not want to lose his pension, but the woman willfully taunts him. There have been attacks on men also in pursuit of their career. I was speaking with a young man who's in university. He says he's with this girl, and the girl came home, and on just one of bad timing, he would say that there was one of the girls in a dorm next door to him. As she was passing, they met for the first time. She said, "Well, I'm so and so, and I am in the dorm down the hall," and so on. And they were just introducing. His girlfriend passed and visited. Well, that upset her. So what that caused her to do, she went on a tirade. She locked him in the washroom. She broke stuff in the house. She hit him. She cuffed him. She did all kind of thing. And she also said to him, if you hit me, you are off campus. You are not going to be on dorm. You'll have to find a place to rent. He knows he does not have money to rent. So I said, "What did you do?" He said, "Mr. Stewart, I just had to take my thing. I tried to fend off any lash that would injure me, but I cannot even hit her back. I cannot even restrain her, anything like that. She locked the door. She hit the key. He can't leave." So men have been going through abuse. And these are real stories. I'm not making up any of them. So the attack when rejection, and this particular example here is when this woman is the one who was sharing it with me, that she was teasing her husband. He didn't like the tease she was getting. She kept doing him something that he always annoyed whenever she does that, and he keeps saying, "I don't like when you do that," and she keep making it as a joke, and she keep taunting him. So he pushed her aside with his elbow, just moved her aside so that she would not be near to him. She herself admit that is what he did. He just pushed her aside. She responded with lash, cuff, and kick, and said, "You are an abusive fella." And she went about now reporting him for abusing her. And she said there's no injury or anything like that, but he had no right to push her off. Well, that's what some of them going through. Then we have also an attack where this picture does not deal with it, but it just was one of those pictures that I saw regarding a newspaper article. Violence against men is not funny. You see, it was on social media where a woman was beating a man naked with a belt, And it is reputed that it's because she heard that he said something that she did not like. And so she and her family had him naked, and she administered the blows to him. That is domestic violence. That is part of abuse. That is what it is about. So sometimes we say domestic violence and domestic abuse, and automatically we think, oh, a man has done something wrong again. And what we want to do is point out here so that we'll create some measure of balance and empathy as to what's going on in the lives of men. So domestic violence against men, in an article written in February 19, 2008 by one Christopher Barber, a scholarly journal. I wouldn't say too long on this because Murchison covered it quite well. It deals with verbal, sexual, emotional, intimidation, or financial abuse. Abusive exercise of power and control over others, which leave individuals feeling scared. The question is, can a man do this? Yes. Can a woman do this? Yes. So therefore, domestic abuse can be perpetrated on either gender. That we not need to be absolutely sure about. So he also gave a distinction between domestic violence and domestic abuse. He said domestic violence is physical aggression. Domestic abuse is financial, sexual, emotional, psychological abuse based on power or stature. And any one of them can take place from either side of the spectrum. So what I want us to understand is this. Even though there are men, yes, who commit violence and abuse, and we say that we are against violence, against women, against children, against men. We say that for those who have joined us late, because some people have a way of joining some of these events and then start to say, well, why is it we only talking about men? It's about men. This one is about men. That's why. So if we understand, the Bible says in all of your getting, get understanding. One of the things that we need to help people to do is understand what may have brought things to this end in the lives of some men, not all men, but in the lives of some men. And let me say this, yeah? Understanding is not agreeing or supporting. It is really inquiring into. That's what the purpose is in this session. So let me tell you the story of this young man. We'll call him Kelvin. This young man told me that his mother was on drugs. His mother was a user of drugs and a seller of drugs. And oftentimes at 4 years old, 5 years old, she will take him with her on these exploits. So that's all he knew as a young man growing up. What are we trying to do? Help you to understand that some of these men who are doing the things they're doing, we need to understand their history in order to be able to understand how we can help them. So he has grown up like this. One night, this particular night, she did not take him to her exploits. She left him at a friend. The young man is telling me the next time he saw his mother was 15 years later. 15 years later. She was arrested on that exploit and incarcerated. Do you understand why the young man I'm speaking to in front of me is a user of drugs and a seller of drugs? Can you understand that? And that's what we are saying. It's not the life he wants. He's at a stage now that he says, Mr. Stewart, I want out. This is not making sense. But he has made some decisions in his life based on his history. So that's how it is. Do you understand also why in this case he has had a number of women that he has not treated well in his life, that he has been abusive to? Because all of those are inhibitions of his thinking capacity, etc., because you're on drugs, etc. All right. Let's go to the story of Dejon. Dejon grew up in a foster home. Dejan does not know his parents because for some reason they gave him up very early in life. Dejan has moved from one place to another place, because as a young man, he's active, he's miserable, he's getting into things and so on. Nobody seemed to want him nor liked him. But he does not have a parent to be able to go back to. He does not have somebody to be able to cry and run towards. But they also ill-treated Dejan, because some people just took advantage of him. They overworked him. They teased him. They lowered his self-esteem, took advantage of him, beat him for almost anything that went wrong, even though he did not do it. So Dejan became a man. Could you understand Dejan's perception of a woman, having had been abandoned by a woman, having gone into foster homes that were run by women, having been ill-treated by women, how he is unable to unleash love and passion naturally to a gender, to a species, to a creation of God that he cannot connect with. So we need to understand the history, the real history of some of these people. Let's just go now to Sheldon. Sheldon told me, and this was not in this country, Sheldon told me that he is a pickpocket. His mother has taught him how to pickpocket. His mother has taught him how to shoplift. And so he went into a shop on this particular day. She was the lookout. That's how they do it. Because he's a child, they would not suspect the child. They would not be looking at the child. They'll be looking at her as the adult for shoplifting. So she will be the lookout. So she would stand at the door, pretend she's waiting for a taxi, glance at him every so often while he shoplifts. Or she'll come into the store and distract, so that they would not be watching him. They'll be watching her. She'll just be looking at prices and so on while he continued to pilfer as a child. The owner of the store realized what was going on with the young boy, grabbed the young boy, and called the police. The mother saw when her son was grabbed, disappeared. He said he has never seen his mother again. She abandoned him. Could you understand why he hates his mother? Could you understand why he hates now, by association, women? Could you understand how he feels abandoned in a time that he's supposed to be supported? Could you understand why he does not have love and empathy, passion within his heart, and he has a lot of adjustments to do? I hope that you do, because a lot of these boys that I have met, up to yesterday, I went and I spoke with a group of young men, 14 years, 15 years, 16 years old, who are in the arms of the court. And their stories are heart-wrenching when you listen to some of the challenges that they have in growing up. A lot of the juvenile delinquency comes from adult delinquency. We have failed many of our boys. We have failed many of our children, and they are growing up to bite us. Let me tell you some facts, and that is why we need to now come out. Boys are 5 times more likely to end up in juvenile delinquent detention. 85% of them grow up without a father. Yeah? Because we have so many single homes. 4 times higher suicide rate than girls. 2 times more likely to be diagnosed at ADHD compared to girls. And diagnosed and administered medicine. Unfortunately, they have found out recently that they have been doing the boys more harm than good by administering this thing to the boys. 70% get grade D and fail grades in school. These are boys. 50% are more likely to fail reading standards than girls, and are more likely to be the victims of domestic violence. Yeah. Let me tell you, these are the facts that we have on men. Men are 76% more likely to commit suicide. 85% more men are homeless. 76% are victims of homicide. 40% are victims of domestic abuse. The majority of men are victims and lost their lives as a result of violent crime. 64% remain longer in prison. And men are 3.5 4 times more likely to be imprisoned than women when both commit the same crime. So it is an uphill battle. Now, this is the part that I would like. We're talking about getting help for these men. International Women's Day is celebrated on March 8th. My own wedding anniversary and my wife's birthday. So I always remember International Women's Day. In 1975, the United Nations started celebrating this day. The first theme put on by the United Nations was celebrating the past, planning for the future. And they called for an equal, they said, United Nations we're talking about. An equal world is an enabled world, and asked for people to work together to create a gender equal world. Not bad at all in statement. The question is, what are the facts? Let's examine the United Nations, and you just Google all international days by the United Nations, all recognized international days. They have asked for equality of gender. So here we go. International Day of Zero Tolerance to Female Genital Mutilation is February 6th. Yep, so that's one for women. International Day of Women and Girls in Science, February 11th. That's another one for women. International Women's Day, March 8th, that we just spoke about. International Day for Girls in ICT, April 23rd. Another one for women and girls. International Widows Day, nothing about the widower, but International Widows Day, June 23rd. International Day for the Girl Child, October 11th. Another one for the women. International Day for Rural Women, October 15th. International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, not against men, but against women, November 25th. So we have 8 days dedicated to women on the calendar of the United Nations. But this is equality that they have asked for. But here, locally, we had a mock parliament in Trinidad and Tobago to discuss gender-based budgeting. And all of those who were in that mock parliament, they brought in were women, females, to discuss gender-based. We have gotten to interpret the word gender to mean woman. Because if you're talking about equality, then you need to now talk about balancing it. So therefore, if you're talking about gender, there must be something in there that you could have in that mock parliament. There was a 12-member committee, I think it is, that was gathered together to discuss the issues of men. The government put it together. I counted about 8 of them being women to discuss men's issues. So listen to what I'm saying. The reality is men lack support. I gave you about 8 internationally recognized days for women. International Men's Day is November 19th, but not recognized by United Nations. And I'm coming to an end because I know that I have a certain more. November 19th is the only day that is called International Men's Day, but United Nations does not recognize it at all. But 8 for women. So this is why we say we need support. That day, if you look at the calendar on Google, the day November 19th, United Nations has labeled that the World Toilet Day. World Toilet Day. You heard right. So we are now moving, a group of us are now moving and asking United Nations, how can you call equality? Give 8 days to women, not 1 day for boys, not 1 day for men. And you say it's equality, and put the November 19th as World Toilet Day. World Day of the Boy Child is May 15th. Again, not recognized by United Nations. That's why the people who are influential to give the men the support to turn this thing around, because if men are dysfunctional, society will never be safe, regardless of what you do with one woman. We've got to be able to do that. And so therefore, World Day, Boy Child Day is not listed by United Nations. Again, we are moving to have that change. There is no day listed that gives specific recognition to any man, to any boy. Yet you will find among the days United Nations has recognized is the World Tea Day. So you could drink tea on World Tea Day. Tuna Day, even tuna got a day. Bee Day, that is where bees get their own day. Migratory birds got their day. Not one for man, not one for a boy. What a travesty. My recommendations, therefore, as we close, is this. Instead of an international day against violence against women, which we support, should not be take place, I want to suggest strongly International Day against domestic violence. Full stop. Why segregate it? Why make it separate? Identify mentors in society that can be able to come forward. Create activities for fathers and boys, and I want to recommend this by Errol Fabian. He has a walkathon, which he used the play on the word walkathon, a walkathon, and where he have father and son walking on a particular day to bring awareness of that relationship between fathers and boys. Thank you so much, and I hope that I was able to say something to inspire you, at least to interest you, to be able to recognize men need help too. God bless you.
Thank you very much, Michael Stewart, for that very engaging and informative session. I'm sure that most of our audience did not recognize the disparity in recognition of the male, more so the men and boys, by our international institutions such as the United Nations. And you drew a very pertinent point there in terms of looking at equality while only focusing on one side, it will create inequality. Of course, as all speakers here tonight, we are not advocating that the male is superior to the female or the female is superior to the male, but we are advocating equality of recognition, equality of rights, and equality of justice. And at the end of the day, violence is violence. Violence does not see gender, it does not see a person, it does not see a race. Just as we may speak about the coronavirus, does not see if you're rich, if you're poor, if you're black, if you're white. Violence and inequality does not see a race or hue of skin color. And it's a very excellent presentation. And we do need to support our men more. We do need the proper recognition of our males in society in order to have a equitable balance of the male to female ratio. And as we come to our final presentation this evening, I'd like to invite you to warmly welcome our final presenter, Wendell DeLeon. He is a trained psychologist. His focus is, I have been honored to attend one of his sessions last year where we dealt with trauma and we dealt with the history of how trauma can affect us. And I saw firsthand how he dealt with how some of our historical issues or our experiences have and continue to influence our lives as it is today. And as he presents, he will be coming with a perspective that shows us how maybe our past experiences, our psyche, our perspective on things can influence our lives. And in keeping with the theme, looking at domestic violence from the perspective of the male, he will be keeping along with the theme in terms of looking at the male psyche, the male perspective. And I encourage you, as you have done with the last two speakers, to pay careful attention, to take your notes, to really tune into what he's saying, so that at the end of this presentation, when we open up the floor for questions for comments, for feedback and suggestion that we can engage each other in a respectful and productive way. So I invite you to please give our final presenter for this evening, Wendell Lillian, your utmost attention as he presents his topic along with tonight's theme. So please join me as we welcome our final presenter, Wendell Lillian.
Thank you, Gassi. Thank you very much. Are you hearing me? Gassi? Right. All right, so Jassy, I also want to welcome, well, I said welcome. I want to also pay respects to Brother Murchison and, of course, Brother Michael, who would have done some human service in terms of this discussion. And what I'm happy is that we have opened the discussion that is a necessary discussion on men. Why? Because I honestly believe that it's something that we don't do enough, and over time, it is a discourse that gets pushed under the rug, unfortunately. So I think I want to jump in from, Brother Michael started a discussion there that I felt was useful. He talked about the United Nations and almost put it in the context that it is a conspiracy theory. Is it that they're conspiring to remove men or to relegate men to a different place altogether? Because there's a perception that there's a patriarchal hegemony that leads the thinking and guides society, and it becomes a very dominant male society. There's still the concept by some people that we have a glass ceiling that some women cannot break through, and which is unfortunate because we see so many world leaders today and speaking in all different spheres of society, impacting on all different things, whether research, whether medicine, whether engineering. Women have excelled, but what I'm a little bit concerned is that is it that women feel that there's a need to excel at the expense of men, being relegated, so that there's only enough space for one person at the top, if that's the case. So there is an underlying kind of, if I may say underlying because it's probably no longer that way, but there seems to be an agenda, as we're talking gender, there seems to be a feminist agenda to possibly demote men. And let me put it this way, and I think Murchison started early with that. We are already doing a great job of demoting ourselves. So the fact that there's an agenda, we are only providing them with the ammunition to further that agenda in order to prove a point that we are perpetrators. The facts are what it is. We are the dominant group of people who are perpetrating, violence against women. So it's an easy sell. It's an easy sell. They don't have to go far. It's what you call a low-hanging fruit. We have set up ourselves that way. But I also want us to go to the point, people, where there is a narrative existing that continues to push us down that road. So you hear talk about, men and boys in a particular intonation. You hear that we are aggressive. You hear that we are abusive. And we continue to reinforce it with our behavior. You hear terminology now of toxic masculinity. And we sit back and we laugh. And you know what? We do not present ourselves to the table when they are having these discussions as it relates to defining masculinity and defining who we are. There will come a time, people, where what you know to be masculine will have been stolen from us. I want you to be mindful that identity theft is taking place, and what is on the table to be stolen is maleness, masculinity, and what we know to be male, what we know to be, what represents us as a man. I'm not talking about the biological aspect of it, the genitalia part of it. I'm talking about the fact that throughout society, over the years, we have been given a portfolio. We have been given roles, and those roles have shifted so far. They're changing roles across the Caribbean, across the society, where we are no longer recognized as being at the helm of the family, which is unfortunate, because part of that means that if we are not recognized as being at the helm, then the ship will run less, or who running the ship? My thing, people, are you hearing me? Right, great. My thing, people, is how do we go about defining what it means to be a man? And I am speaking to this kind of narrative because when we fail to define ourselves, then people will define us define who we are for us. Because if we can't step to the table to say, this is how we want to be called, then anyhow they call you gotta take that enough. Because if it is you're not there, and I have to put some of the responsibility on men, because the absentee fathers, the men who have failed to represent the way they need to, these are the people who contribute to leave the door wide open so anybody could come in there. And this is not a bashing for women. I am saying we have to step up our game. And too often we have dropped the ball on that kind of discussion. We have not turned up to the table to be part of the discussion. And they say, look, you see what we're talking about? They're no longer interested. You know what? That's what we've always been talking about. Men are not serious about anything. They're not even serious about who they are. And when your young son asks your daddy what it means to be a man, what are you going to say to him? Because you can no longer identify that because of those shifting roles. The same thing you're going to talk about is the same thing when you tell your son, but this is what it means to a man. He said, but daddy, mommy doing that too. So where are they saying? So what else do you speak to? Whether it is virtues or values or principles, what else do you speak to? And how have you been, as a man, advocating? You have Brother Michael and you have everybody in different fairs, whether it's Murchison, myself, Fields and all these guys, looking to deconstruct some of the given myth about that has been perpetrated in society about men. So that because nobody hear your story, and that is what they've been saying. The same police who's supposed to give a fair sense of law and order, they are not, and the same men too. They laugh and they find it funny when men come to the table speaking on issues of being abused. Why? I remember one client called the police. Unfortunately, the police was sensible enough to understand that phone call. When they came to the home, the man was locked into a bathroom. He deliberately locked himself in the bathroom because he did not want the woman was prodding him and probing him. And he locked himself and he said he's not coming out until the police came. The man is 6'3". The woman she barely 5 feet. If that man come outside there and decide to be violent on that woman, oh my God, read about it. He said he is so intimidated by that woman. If he had a drop-off thing for his children, he's not even going close to the house. Because she would scratch his car, she would belt his windscreen. Because at the end of the day, part of her safety is that he dare not hit me. Because if he hit me, I will bring the whole brunt of the woman force against him. I would bring my femininity, which is advocated at a weaker sex. But what are we defining as weaker? Her size? Because she's petite, she can get away with that. Because we are also socialized our young men, and we too have been socialized not to hit women. So women have been banking on that over the years to not hit, that you can't hit me. And I heard them, one of them said that tonight, one of you guys said that tonight. They dare you hit me now? Hit me. Because you have been socialized, and if you only break that bond, I know the consequences of that, not just based on legal consequences, but societal consequences. The scourge that you'll be put under and you will be labeled with as a wife beater, as a woman beater. Half the times, and we are not advocating beating any woman here. I endorse what Murchison said. A lot of times, the story never gets told. The story never gets told because nobody look. Imagine that fella hit that woman. Whether he just hold her or push her when she fall down. The story would be, look at this big man beating up on this little woman. That's what the story would be. Nobody would understand that he was probably holding her away from him not to hit her. I have had scenarios as a therapist where women have deliberately hit themselves, beaten themselves, and gone to the police and threatening the man to say, if you don't do what I want, I'm going and tell the police, look what you're doing. Who is more abusive? But how then, what support we have for men? Because you know how much sometimes I have been labeled. Some of my, and even clients who willingly will come to me, females would say, I know you're for your men and them. Why would you say something like that? And you know what? Sometimes I proudly say, I had no problem with that because somebody had to be there for them. Because at the end of the day, we have a barrage of institutions and organizations that are there for women. I've done programs. I could never remember doing a program up in one of those, in St. Augustine, in one of the health centers, one of the community centers for men. And two women outside the community center see the program. Nobody invite them, and it's for men, and they end up inside. They don't put them out. There is always an interest in being involved in what is men thing, but men, we refuse to show interest in ourselves, and this is not a time to play. This discussion we are having here now is because we have failed to start that discussion years back. Let me tell you something. What is the definition about to emasculate? To emasculate means an act of castrating or removal of male sexual parts. But there's another definition inside of there. Because the Merriam-Webster took the time to look at emasculation is to make a man feel less by taking away his power and his confidence. That has been a practice over the years by women because they may not have the physical strength to come at you, but they have the capacity and the emotional strength to needle you and to damage you verbally. And of course, where do we go to really to tell anybody that, look, hey, the words you have just told me, it hurt me. Men don't know how to talk about that. Men have not been trained to discuss emotional hurt. So even society back in the times would have socialized our men not to show emotions. So when he's hurting, he does not have the sense of how to show, display, or articulate that. Women are quite articulate, they're quite glib, they could express themselves, they have been socialized that way. I don't vex at that, I not vex at that. My thing is, it's time for us to start building our male capacity. That for me is critical. When we talk about emasculating a man, we talk about depriving him of his strength, his vigor, his spirit, taking that from him and leaving him flat. And then you beat up on him and say you're good for nothing. You castrate him sexually and say you can't even please me in bed. What happens then when he feels now he's not physically castrated, but emotionally and mentally, you have done that to him and left him in a state where he no longer sees his worth or his value. He has not been trained to deal with stuff like that. So what does he do? He reacts badly. I'm not agreeing with that. I am not endorsing that. We have to train our men how to be able to remove themselves from those kind of triggers. Because even when they try to remove themselves, you know what happened? Here the woman say, where you going? Stay here. Your mama's boy, where you going? Stay here. You're running away. And so there is that kind of additional pressure that comes on the man in order for him to be able to deal with stuff like that. We have to then prepare him psychologically, emotionally, mentally, so that he can deal with when these things start to take away from who he is. When they start to the ridicule that he would be experiencing in relationship, we have to teach our young boys how to be able to deal with the abuses of the young girls, because they get it in the school, the co-ed schools. They get it, as they grow up. And women, young girls have become even more aggressive than the older women. Because at a very young age, and I'm telling you this because I've had a plethora of clients coming to me with some of these concerns. At a very young age, those girls will be, daring the young men, we want sex, and if they say no, because our young men are now so afraid. I tell you, men are coming to get clinical help much faster than they would long ago. Why? Because they realize they don't have the capacity to deal with it. And when our young men are forced in situations, what are gay or what? They're daring them to respond a particular way, because if they don't respond, something wrong with you. We have to give our boys back the confidence. We have to make sure that emotional and mental castration stops, because we have to insulate them against those kind of things. And that, for me, is critical. If nothing come out of today's discussion, we have to start thinking about how we could rebuild our male capacity. The narrative that is going out there, while it has truth to it, I am saying that truth we are provided as ammunition against us. We have to turn that around, because the truth is being misrepresented in certain quarters against us. And we are being continually seen as perpetrators. Even when I have had clients who my heart reach out to them, because I realize they don't have a clue what's going on to them. The woman will be 3-4 steps ahead of them in terms of planning and strategizing. And she had the corner waiting on them to reach out, because here what? I already have how I'm going to divorce you and what I'm going to deal with you. He already yet. And we need to start, maybe that is naivety, maybe it is we are too driven by our other head, and we have been caught up in that dynamic for so long that we are misled in that whole, that set of dynamics in there. So people, let us continue to have these discussions. It not just in this quarter is good, but we need to start to make it a little more prevalent, widen it, put it out there. Let us have an awakening of our men, folks, because at the end of the day, they need to understand what it means to be a man, to teach our young men how to be, not just to evolve from boys into men, responsible men, not men that feel that we are still in the age of hunters, that you have to abuse women, that you have to be able to physically, you need to control a woman by beating her. No, we don't need to control, because that ship sail. What we need to be doing now is understand that there's a level of mutual respect that relationships required. And if it is that we can establish that level of mutual respect, your relationship will go good. But you have to understand something. That respect is not demanded. That respect must be earned, and therefore you must be in a state of mind to be able to present yourself as an honorable person to earn that respect. So this is not something here that we want to water down something to say, okay, we make it an excuse for men who are abusers. We're not doing that. We expect you to be honorable. We expect you to display a level of respect, to be responsible. And at the end of the day, as you step out, we do not expect that you would be treated unfairly or oppressed or in any way taken advantage of, because we have too many issues naturally across the board. Men have been dealing with issues of attachment issues and all the other things that limit them from being able to hold, just like women, to hold on to a healthy relationship. The thing about it is, we are not as gifted to articulate our issues as women might be. We are not at all the different forums that women might be at to be able to present their issues and their cry so that United Nations will always feel a level of empathy for the women folk. But at the end of the day, you're talking about establishing equality, not equity. Because how are we getting equity when it seems to be we want to now overshadow? It's no longer balance. And I have an issue, just like some of the other men who are here, in terms of the unfairness. But if things are unfair and everybody stay quiet and say nothing, the unfairness will continue. And yes, you might believe, like there's a saying, all unfair games will be played over. But you first have to establish that the game is unfair, though. And if you don't do that, then you know what, the referee will blow up the game as a normal game. That game was a no how it was unfair. So unless you step to identify that the game is unfair, then you either deal with what is dished out at you, what is given to you. Let us change the narrative, people. Let us start to make a difference where it matters. Let us empower our men. Let us rebuild capacity. Thank you, gentlemen. Have a good night.
Thank you very much, Wendell. Excellent presentation. Excellent points raised. I mean, we need as men to really step up in our narrative. We as men need to step up in our emotional intelligence to be able to understand what we feel and how we express how we feel so that our voice is heard out there. And you touched on some key points which are essential to the current debate in terms of violence. So now we are at the point where we are looking at inviting comments and feedback and questions as well. Before I go into those who have their hands raised, I'd just like to read some of the comments in the chat. Now we have one of the comments from Phoenicia Alexis. She's saying, excellent presentation. She definitely agrees and supports the course to help men balance themselves as a wholesome individual, which all of our presenters would have spoken about this evening. We also have Sandra Jack, who's saying excellent presentation. She's wishing everyone a good evening, and she's saying that society needs to support our men and so assist them in fulfilling their role, which is what the presentations tonight have been harping on in some form or the other. So we have a few hands up so far, and I'll just go with the hands in order of when they were raised. So I'd like to invite Phoenicia Alexis, if she would, to unmute her microphone to present her question, her feedback, her comment for our presenter or presenters this evening.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I definitely think this was an awesome topic and the messages were great. I have two questions, which are a little bit rhetorical, and a few comments. So basically, I definitely believe abuse is not only physical, right? As a female, you know, we learn to cry and all these different things. You fall down, you get boo-boo on your leg. You might run to daddy or even mommy, and it's okay. But I have been growing up and seeing boys not being allowed to express themselves emotionally, and that is abuse. Because then they grow up and they can't express themselves, and it's going to affect us. So if we, the women, as mothers, even though I don't have a son, but I have a daughter, and I teach her to respect men, and if they're crying, don't laugh at them and say, you're crying, haha, is a girl, because boys have feelings too. Right? So that's one thing. The other thing is, I understand from a spiritual point that men are supposed to be providers. However, I am constantly hearing women talking about he have to pay the bills and he have to do this and he have to do that. And that really upsets me, because as women, we are not supposed to be dependent on the men. God created us to be supportive. And being part of supportive, even if we are not working, is not to put an extra strain on the man and expect that he's supposed to buy every diamond in the world. You understand? So I think definitely that's another way women abuse men, and it really upsets me. I have never been a woman to support woman empowerment in any way, form, or fashion, because I see it as inequality. Right? Men really need help in every form and every way. So my questions were, who are teaching and setting examples for healthy and positive behaviors for the men and the boys? And what are the subliminal messages parents are sending to their boys? Because we take subliminal messages very lightly. And being a young mother myself, I am seeing how subliminal message is very important. Simple thing as waking up late on the morning. That's me teaching my daughter it's okay to get up late and be late for everywhere you go. Subliminal messages is how children learn the most. Sometimes they don't know how to ask how to do something, so they just look at what you do and then they follow through. And if you are not explaining things to them, especially in a case where you might be tired and you come home and you snap at them, I started practicing telling my daughter, Mommy is tired, let's talk tomorrow. Mommy need to get rest. We need to do that with the boys as well. Because when we snap at the boy is going to think it's okay to snap at the girls. So this is definitely an issue in society and around the world that needs to be addressed. And I am willing to support in any way, form, and fashion. Good night, everyone.
Thank you very much. Wonderful feedback, wonderful comments. And I will leave it open to our presenters this evening, Murchison, Michael, and Wendell, to address the two concerns raised. One in terms of who's teaching our boys, and the message that is being put forward in terms of, that balance, in terms of men speaking up, in terms of raising our children to understand that it's not just the females that need to express themselves, but also our males as well. So before we go to Jules, who also has their hand up, I'd like to invite our presenters to give their feedback and comments on what they have just heard from Phoenicia.
I will give way. I think Brother Mike and Brother Wendell would like to take a bite of that. Are you there?
Let me see. Wendell, are you going? All right. Who's raising and training our children? Women. The statistics show that we have the majority of boys being raised by women. That's an unchallenged statistic. So therefore, obviously, it must be that the women are the ones training our boys. Should that be? No. I think that it should be that you should have a collaborative joint approach. Unfortunately, while there are some delinquent fathers, there are a number of men who want to be in their children's lives, who want to be in the heart and of their children and so on, but they are not being allowed to do it because there are some women who are using the courts to disenfranchise a man from his child. They are going there to lie and to punish him because the court, in some cases, automatically thinks that the woman is the better caregiver than the man. So there are times that I know of so many cases where a man is giving support, financial support to the woman and the child, and because he has taken up another woman, she wants to be able to punish him, takes him to court and lie and say that he does not support, and what the court administer for the support was less than what she was getting voluntarily from him. You understand me? So therefore, that all of those scenarios need to change, and that is why in Wendell's presentation, we need to show up for our own issues. Thank you.
If Wendell not ready, I would also say that we miss something very, very important. A child is a human being, and holistically, we are not just physical being. We are spiritual, we are financial, we are psychological, we are social. When the woman takes the man to court, so she gets money, and if I could put quote unquote, to buy Pampers and milk, doesn't the child need that emotional support?
Yes.
Doesn't the child need psychological and all the other support? But where's the consideration for that? It's almost like if that does not matter. And I will not let him see his child. And the child, mommy, when I see my daddy, I tell you, don't tell me about that salad man. You know? I don't want to hear nothing about that. But you are the mom, and nothing in the world will change that you are the mother and he's the father. So we got to go to the point where accommodation could be made, where we could divorce ourselves from our emotions and deal with the fact. The man as a man should be given the opportunity to be a father to the child. And the mother shouldn't poison his mind, nor should the father, when the child comes, poison the mind of the child against the mother. But there should be that balance and love where, listen, mommy and daddy couldn't make it, but you don't worry about that. I love you as your mother, and he loves you as a father, and let's work with that. And as you grow older, we can tell you more. All right? Thank you very much. Over to Brother Whitney.
Very well, Murchison and Michael. You know, definitely, I like the idea of co-parenting. But let's be real, Murchison, 90% of the ideal of co-parenting don't always take place, because there is that manipulation that the court is being complicit for the most part to ensure that the woman is as Michael said, the nurturer is given the larger share of the care, so she gets care and control, while the man probably gets liberal access. Liberal access is what it is, liberal access. So you might get it whenever she feels, however she feels, based on whatever mood she's in, based on if she doesn't have anything, or if she have nothing, but she feels that she wants to have something. The minute you reach outside the gate, she decides, you know what, I'm going out with the child. You can't see the child today. And that is done. And men, I've seen men cry, hurting. You know what they have to do? They have to go back into slavery times. I hear what I'm saying, eh? They have to go back when back in the day, the men showed no sense of connection to a child. They were very removed from the child that they had on the plantation, so that the master, the master would never feel that he liked that child, because the minute he shows a connection to the child, he is now sold into slavery. He is removed from that plantation and sold. So men have to now become very stoic and very disconnected from the child in order for the woman to not recognize that that's his vulnerability. Because if it is recognized as a vulnerability, watch out. I'm coming after you because I realize you love that child, so you'll do anything to be with that child. So I'm coming at you. I'm making all kind of unreasonable demands just to make sure. Leave that woman. I don't want that woman. You know what? Why you have that woman next to my child? I don't like her. And so your life is dictated by everything I feel or I do. That is not abuse? Come on, man. Let's be real.
Okay, let's be real indeed. Let's be real indeed. We have Jules who has their hand up. So Jules, I invite you to unmute your mic and present your questions or comments now, please.
Good night, everyone. Great presentation. Wow, where was this when I was growing up? I mean, in my younger days, when I had my kids. Father groups are important. This is wonderful. If I may deposit one smaller nugget, however, is that in my experience, men need to learn how to separate themselves from the separation of their wife or their girlfriend with a child, and just contribute to the child's welfare and being, because the child is important, right? And something that the brother said lastly, you know, women tend to railroad men, you know, using the child to railroad a man through the relationship. And as a man and as a father, I have learned, because there were times when I will encounter with such a situation where you have to learn how to separate yourself from, you know, from the emotions and from the relationship. But what I was really looking forward to hear tonight, and it wasn't presented, so if I may just, you know, bring it forth. Mental abuse and emotional abuse in relationship where there's no children involved. Where's the support for men for that? It's something that I would like to have seen or know. If there is, where would you find that? So one of the collaborators, I'm pretty sure, will be able to explain that to me. But that was my deposit. You know, the old adage, don't let people know what makes you hurt, because, you know, they will use it against you to hurt you. So you're growing up, you're taught as a child with this, you know, from your mother or your father or your peers growing up, and you, as a man, you grow up with that. So you don't show that soft side of you. You know, you're afraid of showing your vulnerability and the transparency to, you know, to your spouse. And, you know, you're afraid of letting them know what hurts you or what, you know, makes you sad. So instead, you buckle that all up inside, right? And you take the abuse, okay? And you take the abuse. And, you know, you have no way of venting. So how does a man deal with a situation as such is what I would like to hear. And thank you so much for your time. This was great. I learned a lot. Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much, Jules. I'll open the floor for any of our presenters. I see Wendell ready and raring to go. So I'll start off with Wendell.
Sure. Thanks, Jassy. And in responding to Brother Jules, I want to say that, well, for the most part, you have to be a particular kind of man to want to stay in a relationship where you don't have a child. And I say a particular kind of man because it speaks of one's spirituality and, I guess, your desire to preserve a marriage that, if it is that you are walking a part of spirituality and your connection with the Creator, you may not want to compromise a marriage, even though it may be one without children. But then there is a connection to your spouse. And the question inside of there is, a lot of times we have to both recognize that if we are entering a marriage as a man, what are some of the earlier damages that you would have experienced? And I'm saying, I use the term damages, we could call it fractures, we could call it, you know, whatever you want. A lot of times we have been hurt as men, just as some women have been hurt. We carry forward that hurt into relationships without sometimes recognizing the nature of that hurt. We carry it forward, and then when she brings her hurt in there, we make now a potpourri of hurt inside of there that becomes very toxic for both people. My thing is, first recognize what your hurt is. And if you understand your own hurt, then it comes like a fella getting an injury in his leg. And so you know that you're favoring one leg because you have an injury there. So you can't put too much pressure. Knowledge is power. So you know that leg is not where you would put all your weight. And so you would probably look and throw your weight on the next side because there's an awareness of what that hurt is. If you enter relationships with such an awareness, it would help you to strategize differently. It would help you to recognize and possibly speak to the other partners to say, hey, I'm being vulnerable here. And I hear Brother Jules use the word vulnerability, and somebody else. I'm being vulnerable here to tell you that I have a hurt. So don't take advantage of that. Because to take advantage of that is to become abusive. And that's one of the things that people are afraid of. Trust. To be vulnerable, where somebody now take that as ammunition and hurl it back at you, where it is a vulnerable thing. So I know my leg is not right. I tell you about it, and trust you will be a little bit, responsible when you deal with me on that leg. But you choose not to because you start to apply pain on that. So you want to, you want to play thing, and I start to lean on the leg because I know it's part of your vulnerable side. People, you need to be a little more sensitive. Now, if you're in a relationship and somebody doing that to you, the question is, at what point are you going to remove yourself? At what point you're going to stay? And is it okay to remove yourself based on your levels of spirituality, or is that something that will be looked at you in a particular way? And I deliberately set it up like that. So when are you guys going to take it from there now?
Right. No, okay, go ahead, Brother Mike. Go ahead.
No, I think he covered it. I think we could go to the next speaker. I think he did quite well in covering the presentation.
Right. There's another hand up there.
I think there's a Darrell Steele.
Yeah.
And then there are
Okay,
some.
okay, no problem. Well, before we reach a Darrell Steele, I saw in the chat that JAS is saying, what can women do to get men to open up and tell women when they feel emasculated? So what can women do to get men to open up and tell women when they feel emasculated?
Okay, I will take a shot at that. The question is, in building that relationship, what kind of foundation did the both parties put up? I'm not going to just tell you that just like that without being sure that you can handle it or that it will build the relationship. So I'm going to tell you I'm emasculated. Remember, based on the background where we have just spoken about where men come from, it wouldn't be easy to tell you that. Do I have confidence to tell you that? So that's one of the problems. One of the things is we don't build relationship. So even with parents and children, you think they just grow up and when they get bigger, they expect that. Why didn't tell me this? You got to build the relationship and you have all the time to build it. So when we enter a relationship, if we can have an open door policy and confidence that what I'm telling you will stay with you. Because if I tell you something in confidence, remember, had we not had an intimate relationship, you would not have had that information. If I and you finish now, are you going to take that information that you only found out because of our intimacy and put it in the public? That would be betrayal to the highest level. And therefore, if I am going to make myself vulnerable and give you information that could be damaging, it could also be helping, I have to be able. So yes, how will men do that? If we build the relationship, then I shouldn't feel vulnerable. Put the man in the position of your parents. When a child is at the weakest and the parents find out, what does parent do? Not empathize? Whether it's a man or a woman commit a crime and they go in prison, who comes? Not the mom? And do they feel afraid to tell the mom? No, because she's going to be there. In that sense. So why can't we translate that into the relationship where we have that mutual respect, that confidence that, listen, regardless of whether this relationship work or not, I will die with what was said in confidence. And especially when that is betrayed, the next person coming along is not even going to get a fair chance. That could be damaging for life. So yes, a man should be able to tell you and vice versa that, listen, if you do that, it will make me feel this way. But that wouldn't just come because we are together. We got to build that as we communicate one with another. But Mike?
You know,
but Mike,
the whole issue of openly having men to open up. I'll just give you two scenarios where a woman she came in and said that her husband does not talk and he drives up the wall, that he does not talk. So she's explaining some of the challenges she has in the relationship. And I allowed her for 15 minutes. She's running on to explain all the challenges in their relationship. Her husband was about to correct something she said after 15 minutes of talking. And she turns to him and says, wait, let me talk. You let me talk. After I finish talk, then you could talk. And the man cowered back and he sat back in his seat. And she's asking, why is it her husband doesn't talk? Because it is danger out there. It is the course is not clear. A lady came in with a young man and said, you know, he's not brave. I find for a boy 24 years old, he can't express himself and so on. So I asked, okay, bring him in. So she brought him in. My test to see what was going on, I gave him the form to fill out. There's a form that whenever they come to see me that they fill out. I gave him the form to fill out to see what she will do. And as I suspected, she took the form from him and filled out his name. Sat down and did everything, and I'm seeing he does not have a voice because the mother does not allow him to have a voice. When we sat down there and I asked him, what is it you like to do as an ambition? She jumped in and said, you know, he started to do this and so on, and I don't know why he's not continuing. Every time I asked him a question, she answered. And then I said, what did you say you're bringing me in for? He doesn't express himself somewhere or the other. He can't. He's not allowed to. And so I asked her to wait outside. And she said, Mr. Stewart, that is exactly what I think is my problem. I don't get a chance to say anything. I don't get a chance to have an opinion. I don't get a chance. But I love my mother, and I don't know how to deal with that. So a lot of times, and to answer the question directly now, affirm a man. Affirm him. Whenever you are going to talk to a man, especially if you have to criticize him, affirm him first. Not a bad idea. I want to also say this as a part of, to add on to what you just suggested. In that way, you have not condemned his idea. But then, if you ask him, where you get that from? Nah, I can't see that working at all. You have just said, you are a stupid fella to come up with that idea. So he's not going to be open to share ideas with you. So one of the things is affirm him and then add your information onto him and say, what do you think? In order, as one of the methods of having this conversation to flow, so that the man would now recognize that, hey, listen, I'm not being emasculated, I'm being supported.
Excellent.
Well done, Brother Michael. Again, Brother Murchison. I just want to add one little piece in there. And I guess it would encapsulate everything. Create a safe space. What can women do to get men to open up? Create a safe space in the relationship. It must be safe. I must be able to know it's safe. And safety comes with a sense of valuing what I say. You remember some time back, there was a big court case where in a relationship, a man took a video of, and that time they were in a relationship. They were in love. Whether they were married, I don't know. But there was a video that they shared, a sexual video that they shared willingly, that they decided to do. That was within the ambits of the relationship. Just like Brother Merchant says, so I allow myself to be naked. I open up myself in a sense that I share hurt, pain, vulnerabilities. I share innermost things about my life that I don't share with anybody else. So I expect you to hold that in a safe space. I expect you to treat it with a level of sacredness. I expect you to honor what we are sharing. Not as soon as we break up, you run to tell the next girlfriend everything about me. Or you run to tell everybody else. So you now violate that. As Brother Murchison said, when I go into our next relationship, you feel like telling anybody anything? You have to get a crowbar to get that from her. I said, hey, so create a safe space and operate with honor and respect.
Excellent points, excellent points. I have Ruth Robertson asking, how can I get involved and stay involved? And then we'll take Daryl and Saisha. So Ruth is asking our presenters, how can I get involved and stay involved?
Jassy, that question is a little vague. Involved in what way? involved in a relationship? I don't know how to begin
to. It ties into getting men to express themselves more.
I think what she, the person privately sent the chat and said it was dealing with involved in, I think they recognized the disparity with UN.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
And they felt that they wanted to join in having the UN recognize men. Because of that, you have so many for women and not one for men. So there's a petition that will be coming out. Errol Fabian, those of us in Trinidad and Tobago know who Errol Fabian is putting that together along with a video. And some of us have done a recording stating UN change that date or some short burst like that. So we'll keep you all informed as to that develops. And when we come for petition, we're asking people to just sign the petition so that the United Nations will know both men and women disagree with this disparity.
And I think she just clarified there in the chat. I think you're correct. So I think that would have answered her question that something is on its way. So,
Murchison, you know, what is interesting is that here it is, and Ruth, I have no qualms with your enthusiasm. But at the end of the day, here it is again. A woman is seeking to pioneer the charge for men. And I'm not upset with Ruth, it just tells me that we need to step out from behind our safe zone to put ourselves out there to do exactly what Ruth's suggesting. In that we have vacated the helm. You see that being at the wheel, that to drive that vehicle, we have vacated that space. So yeah, because Ruth is saying, well, hey, where we going? What are we doing? Let me get something done. And when the men, I'm sure this is a program for men. How many men would have said that in the chat? How many men are stepping up to say, hey, let me go with this, I am on board. And that's what we are talking about. We shouldn't have to leave here today feeling like, well, you know what? We sound good, but what next?
And that's what the forum is about, that we begin to take the initiative to do what men ought to do and have some balance. Jassy just stepped out a minute, so could Daryl please ask his question?
Hi, good night. You all hearing me?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Firstly, I thoroughly enjoyed the session so far. I learned because I really did not know. I thought that the International Day for Men was recognized by the UN, so I learned something tonight. So yeah, Jules had a statement just in his earlier contribution about men having to learn how to separate themselves from the marriage and the father role when a relationship is separating or heading down the path of divorce or whatever the case may be. I currently face that particular challenge. So I would like some techniques on how to do it, because often what I find is that when I think about the possibility of going, because I'm not in a position right now to have them with me, but when I think of the possibility of going to them, I did it once, and the experience was, it was different in a kind of a not so positive way. And for me, that became an even bigger challenge. So I really would love some ideas, some techniques, because I mean, I think in some respects, when men involve themselves in situations like that, we are often as much the abusers in some way or form as we are the abused. And because that happens, it becomes difficult for the man to actually deal with some of the situations that come about as a result of that. So at least for me, I find it very challenging to have conversations to figure out what's the way forward. And then when the person is pressuring, or you feel as though the person is pressuring, it then becomes something of you yourself start to retreat within yourself and not sure how to move forward. I don't know if I was clear.
Well, to some extent, yes. I understand it's a bit confusing because, you know, I mean, if I draw from the picture you put forward there, is that the relationship is not going pretty good. I draw from it also that you're talking from a marriage point of view, as a married person, a rocky relationship with children separated, it could lead to divorce. And so you want to spend time with the children, but you feel intimidated to go because of the situation of the marriage. Did I get it sort of correct?
Yes.
Right. So it's never going to be easy, but it's going to call for a lot of maturity. It is also going to call for a lot of controlling of emotions. So that when you go, it's not so much of a demand, but try to have a treaty where we can talk and separate the issues. That as the father of the child, you want to be part of the children's life and sort of not get into the conflict of fighting over where you all are. If you can separate the issues and come to an agreement whereby this is what is going to happen in the absence of our decision while we're making, take away the aggression, because what has happened before is going to have an effect on where you all are currently and the decisions and the feelings and the hurt behaviors inside of that whole situation. But of course, with as much humility as possible and strength of character, you ought to put forward that you want to do it and take the chance. I hand over to Brother Mike or Wendell, as the case might be.
I think it has been answered. There's another person with a hand up though.
So that's Saisha. If you're still there, feel free to go ahead and present your question.
A while, you're hearing me, right? Yeah, okay. A while ago when Mr. Dillion spoke, I heard a question presented to the brothers that wasn't answered, right? So I'll ask, would you advise our brothers who are being abused to leave the relationship? That's one question. The other one is, and at what point is the man expected to return to relationship, if at all?
All right, let me take the second one. At what point he should return? If the relationship has a new dynamic taking place, and I would also add a new and improved dynamic. What happens is that some people leave a relationship because they're just not getting along, it is too hostile, too toxic, and so on. And then they separate, but they miss each other. And because they miss each other, they get back with each other. Nothing has changed. Same situation. I think you should never get back there. The Bible says in the multitude of counselors, there is wisdom. Get good counsel before you go back in. Because just as when the Bible says you should not enter into marriage too hastily, right? Without advice. It should be done advisedly, discreetly, and in the fear of God. You shouldn't leave it either without good advice. You should not also leave hastily. You're supposed to be able to leave under good advice. And when you return under good advice, right? And so once you all have agreed that this is the new norm, this is the new circumstances, these are the non-negotiables that is going to take place. If you come back, no hitting. I'm not going to take no hitting. I'm not going to take no horning. I'm not going to take this. Say what your non-negotiables are and say what your negotiables are. Okay, well, I know that you never used to cook properly, but all right, I will take you back, even if you can't cook. I know you'll be late whenever we're going out, and I used to get vexed because you're always keeping me back. I'm going to negotiate that. But there are other things that I don't negotiate. Come back with a new system. And most times, the both minds that created the problems cannot be the mind that solves it. It has to be a different mind you've got to come up with. So that's the second question. Somebody would take the first question.
Right. In terms of violence is not remember we're talking about domestic violence. And we said when we started that domestic violence is a no-no. It does not matter whether it's male, female, or children. It's a no-no. So if there's a situation like that, then it would not have just start that. Even if it did, discussion have to take place and work with it. You see what I'm saying? But what has happened is marriage is a commitment, and a lot of people forget that. It's a commitment, it's a commitment, it's a commitment. And it's not so easily walk away from. And therefore, because it's a commitment, we need to, just as Brother Mike say, good counsel on both sides. You listen to good counsel and you reason and decide where we can go. But violence is supposed to be a no-no. All right? That. Over to Brother Wynn.
Thank you, both Michael and Murchison. One of the things people you need to realize is this: the whole issue of violence. There's a cycle of violence, and there's a cycle in terms of the whole. You know, abusers and perpetrators operate coming out of power dynamics and control issues that they seek to have and they seek to perpetrate on their victims. So, be it a female or a male, the same goes. That person needs to have somebody to control. That person needs to be able to feel that sense of power. So the question is, if you have been abused, do you leave? To stay is to empower that abuser. To stay, remember, part of the abuse is also being emasculated. Abuse is a form of emasculating an individual. Whether it's verbal abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, mental abuse, you emasculate and strip that person of their confidence, of their self-confidence. You strip that person of their sense of power. You strip that person of their sense of self-efficacy. You deprive them of whatever spiritual and sexual vigor within themselves to be that kind of partner to you. And so therefore you make them fully dependent on you, whomsoever that abuser is. So if you are in a relationship where that is being done to you, the more you stay, the more you allow that person to be empowered to continue the process. So sometimes you have to step away from the table in order to renegotiate, as Brother Michael said, what those terms and conditions are. Because if you are there, then you can't negotiate if you're already inside of it. You have to remove yourself. Then the negotiation can start. Well, here what? I can return if X, Y, Z changes. And if it does not change, then the question is, am I asking for things that are unreasonable? And is it that if it is that it is not unreasonable, is it that the person does not want to give up that sense of abuse or change their behavior to accommodate a better relationship? So those are telltale red flags that you should see if the person is unwilling to make those adjustments. And then unless there is that kind of renegotiation and readjusting and counsel to be able to reintegrate the parties, then I strongly suggest that you hold your ground until those things are clarified, because to return into that is to expose yourself to greater hurt.
Yes, and I think the second speaker, what is the second question? Who was the guy again? Jules, right. Jules said that he did not hear about the psychological and emotional, but this is the third session. The first two sessions we went into detail about it. And I'll just clarify that do not think that domestic violence is just physical. Sometimes the greater damage is done psychological and emotional, and you pretend you're innocent. You see what I'm saying? So the physical, a coffee in your eye, everybody can see that. That is wrong. But so, and even more damaging is the psychological, the emotional, and the financial. You see, all those are domestic violence. Right? but we tend to, everyone can easily see something that is physically done. So I could be taunting you very subtle and nobody knows. When you explode, I could easily say, do you all see what I have to deal with? And everybody sees that, and you look like an angel, calm, like nothing is happening. That also is very dangerous. So that's where the help is needed, and parties have to be willing, as Brother Mike say, in the multitude of counselors, there's safety. But there are some people who don't take counseling because the truth is they already made up their mind in the direction they want to go. They will tell you that, you know, you have to live to see it. They're not going to take the counsel because there's a way they want to go. So it appears like you're interested in going the right way, but the reality we see it is that you don't want to. So it's a very thin line, and all of the different areas has to be looked at and proper counsel given.
All right, thank you very much to our presenters for their feedback on the questions. I'm not seeing any more hands raised. I don't know if you all are watching the time more than us, but I know that we set the time for 7 to 9 p.m. However, we don't want you to leave without getting the full value of what you came here for. So if there are any more questions, we'll take just about 2, at least end at least by 9:10. But from the chat, we see that the presenters did respond to the questions that were posed. Because I see people saying thank you very much to the presenters. And of course, as Murchison just alluded to, this is just one part of a series of presentations. And 2021 God Spare Life, we will be looking at revisiting some of these issues, because we know that the issue of violence, especially domestic violence, is something that requires a lot of introspection, a lot of work, a lot of depth. And we can't just look at it from just a physical perspective or even just from one gender-based perspective. So while we do encourage the questions now, we encourage you to contact our presenters. I'll put the information in the chat soon, very much, but you can look out for Premier Counseling Institute on Facebook. You can like and subscribe, and on YouTube, you can follow us on YouTube and look out for the upcoming sessions in 2021 God Spare Life, where we'll be tackling these issues and many more, not just in Trinidad and Tobago, but across the Caribbean. So while in TNT, we may look at things one way, you will be surprised that the same issues have a different perspective across the islands of the Caribbean. So I encourage you to follow the Facebook page, to subscribe on YouTube, so that you are always informed of what is the next session that's upcoming. So, well, I'm not seeing any more hands, so I'd just like to invite our presenters for the next 5 minutes. Any final closing comments? And I'll start with Wendell as our last presenter. The first shall be last and the last shall be first. So I'll start with Wendell, and if you have any final or closing comments to just present on the topic tonight or anything else, feel free to do so. I'll give you 45 seconds to do so.
Firstly, Jassy, I want to thank you. Excellent moderating and on point. I also want to acknowledge my 2 colleagues, Micah Stott and Murchison Alexis. You know, great guys, and of course, very much grounded in all that they're doing, and with an intent and a passion to make a difference, like myself. I just want to say to all the persons who took the time to tune in on a Friday evening, thank you. Thank you for that. Little nuggets to take away. While the task might seem Herculean, it is that we can make our own difference in our small way, in our own relationship, in the lives that we touch, the people that we might be able to. We know somebody's going through something, you know, and it might be a man, not necessarily always a woman, You might have men who may come to you, and I'm saying this because not that I'm accusing anybody of doing this. You have vulnerable men who will come to you as a woman and say, hey, I'm going through this. Because he mightn't be comfortable talking to another man. Because that's not how men might roll. I'm not going to openly come and present my issue unless I'm going to a counselor or therapist. I may not do that. So I might start a discussion because I'm frustrated, and I would start to talk to a female and say, hey, this is what I'm dealing with my wife. I am saying to you, the woman receiving that cry for help, do not you capitalize on that vulnerability. That is a man who is vulnerable. He's not an available man. He is a damaged man. He's vulnerable and he needs help. Don't start to look at him as a possibility, because you're going to take a damaged man, try to make him your own. He's going to get healing some point in time if it's later down the road. And then when he does get that healing, he would remove himself from you. And then you would say that, man bad. I'm saying to you, hey, if he's coming to you and you recognize that he's hurt and he needs help, your responsibility as a good Samaritan is to guide him to the right kind of support that he can get the help. Not necessarily to capitalize on that, to make it, to see it as an opportunity. It is an opportunity, yes, to help a brother in need. And I want to leave that there. However you want to take it and run with it, I want to put that out there. Let's continue to build our men. They need help, just like women need help. And so we all have to come together to create that better society. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Wendell. And yes, you have hit the nail on the head. We do need to support our men. We need each other to build each other to promote a better society. Michael Stewart, any closing comments from you?
Yeah, that you said the first will be last, so there was a switch, and the last will be first, there's a switch. But I was second and I'm still second. Right? Where's the equality? Yeah, but I enjoyed the session. I always enjoy the session with these two gentlemen. These two gentlemen, I think, bring a wealth of knowledge to the table. I appreciate that. I want to leave a message with all of you here that I firmly believe that in all of our thrust to be able to promote women and let them break the glass ceiling and all of that, if we don't rise with the men, we will never float at all. Because if you have a dysfunctional male who is out there with a gun, he's going to plunder the homes of people. If you have a dysfunctional boy who's growing up, who's angry with the world, he can do undue damage to this society. And when somebody does not feel as though they are an author of their own destination, and those around them that they are part of that process, they will sabotage it to the point of destruction. So therefore, let us recognize that we do not compete with each other. Let's complete each other. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael. And of course, as I said, the first will be last and the last shall be first. The second will be second regardless. So I'd like to invite Murchison Alexis to give our closing comments and feedback, and of course to give us some insight into what we can expect for the year 2021, God willing. So Murchison, take it away.
Yes, again, it's been wonderful. I've enjoyed, as we do, lecturing together with Brother Michael Stewart and Wendell De Leon. And, this is just another one of the great times we have had, sharing our knowledge that, God has allowed us to have. And of course, yes, the COVID did shut us down this year because we had meant to be up the Caribbean and other places, but because of the closed borders, at least we thank God for the ability of the platform, the various social platform, that we can still have this session, which is necessary. I have lived a while on the earth, not very long, but long enough to see a whole generation of young men missing. Who not in jail is in the cemetery. And it's very sad. The heart of our nation we have lost. The leaders of tomorrow that should take over from the older ones are out of action. And therefore, male in Trinidad and elsewhere have become an endangered species. And so we must take responsibility now. We can't leave it to chance. So I enjoy this tremendously. I am happy to see that a lot of women were on and they were supportive. They understand this wasn't a bashing session for ladies or youth, so we didn't ignore it because we, as I say, for those who come on this session, we did have 2 previous sessions where we had focused on the ladies and the male and the children. But I'm thankful that we could have looked at the men and realized what Brother Mike has said and what Brother Wendell in the closing remarks said, that we need to be protective of our male, take the rightful place to work together with the women so we can have a better, healthier society. Yes, as Brother Mike would have said, break all the glass ceiling and so on, but we need to work together, not to compete against each other. There's no winner there. So I'm thankful for tonight and for what was done. I'm thankful for our moderator. He did an excellent job, as usual, in keeping things in stream. And next year, you could look forward to not only talking about the situation of domestic violence, but relationship is breaking down all around us, and we need to bring some more healing. So there'll be a lot of topics that will be targeting both the men, the women, and the marriage, and the actual communication and relationship. So you can look forward to a lot of great things next year as we continue to do that work. God bless, be safe, observe the protocol. I thank you all very much, all that tuned in tonight, and I'll hand over to our moderator for his closing words and prayer.
Thank you very much. Lovely close to tonight's session and lovely close to the end of this year, 2020. I know it has been a very challenging year for most of us. However, we have no control over most of the changes that occur within us. We only have control over how we respond to those changes. And if I may say personally, one of the books that have influenced me this year was As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. And it really alludes to our mindset, because our thinking influences our actions influence our habits, and our habits influence our character. And the topic tonight isn't far from that in terms of our mindset influences our actions as men, which influences our habits as men. And we look forward to 2020 God's Spare Life, where we can look at a change in our mindset as it pertains to relationships, as it pertains to being men and women who are committed to being the best that we can be, and the best that we can be within the ambit of a relationship and the ambit of being citizens of a nation. So as we close tonight, I invite you to join with me in prayer as we close, seeking God's blessing and guidance as we close off this year, as we close off this session, and as we seek his guidance in everything we do as men and women. Father in heaven, we come before you, thanking you for this day, Father, for life, health, strength, all your blessings and mercies, Father. Father, we thank you for being such a gracious God to us, and we ask for your continued blessing, your healing, your strength and protection. Father, amidst this coronavirus pandemic, we thank you for allowing us to be able to come together virtually, Lord. Father. Thank you for the technology, Father, because we know that Amen. You allow things to happen according to your own time. And Father, right. We praise your name, Father. Father, we look forward to your continued protection and blessings. Father, as we end this year, 2020, we ask for your renewed strength and hope. We ask that you help us to continue to transform our thinking, that we will continue to be guided by your wisdom and your knowledge, that we will continue to build ourselves as men and women to
Yes, Lord.
work together in a spirit of equity, Father, in a spirit where we look to build each other. We don't look to put down each other, but we look to work together as joint heirs of your salvation, Father.
Yes, sir.
Be with us and bless us, Father. Be it all those who may be ailing at this time, all those who are sick, all those who may be grieving of the loss of loved ones, Father. Please be
Amen.
with them and
Yes.
comfort them and strengthen them, Father.
Yes,
And be with us as we end this year. We have a couple of days again, but we ask for your strength. We
Yes,
ask for your
Lord.
healing. We ask for your protection. And we ask for your guidance throughout the new year. We don't know what the future holds, but we know that you hold the future, Father. And we
Yes,
ask for
Father.
that wisdom and strength to be able to adapt to whatever change comes our way, Father, so that we may be able to bring your glory and honor into the new year, Father. Please be with us
Amen.
and bless us. Thank you for our presenters tonight. We ask for your continued blessing upon them, upon their family members, their loved ones, and that you continue to strengthen them, continue to provide your wisdom and guidance to them so that they may be able to provide this knowledge and impart that wisdom upon us so that we may also grow and learn, Father. We thank you for
Yes, Lord.
everything. We praise your name and ask for your forgiveness through Christ, and we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. And we pray that you have a safe night. Continue to follow whatever health regulations that abide in your country, your place of origin. And we pray that you join us again in 2021, Gospel Life, as we continue to seek to build each other, because we are people of value who seek to add value to people. Thank you again,
Amen.
and have a wonderful night. May God bless you all. Thank you.
Amen. Amen. Have a good night. God bless.
Night, everyone.
Good night. Yeah.